She was asked to play one simple waltz for the Duke, but her music changed his heart forever. A true story, Vienna, 1882. There are moments in life that look completely ordinary from the outside. A woman sits down at a piano. A room full of people waits. Someone nods. Begin. Nothing about that picture looks like it could change anything. But sometimes, in those quiet, unremarkable seconds, something shifts, and two lives are never the same again. This is one of those stories.
Run!
Her name was Anna Lehr. She was 27 years old, and she lived in a small apartment in the working part of Vienna, a city that, in 1882, was one of the most beautiful and most unfair places in the world. Beautiful because of the music, the art, the grand boulevards, the golden light on the buildings in autumn. Unfair because of who got to enjoy all of that and who did not. Anna had grown up without money. Her father had run a small trading business that slowly fell apart while she was still a child. They weren't starving, but they were always careful, always counting, always hoping the month would be kind to them. What they did have, in the corner of their small living room, was an old piano. Anna's mother had played it when she was young, before life got heavy. And from the time Anna was 5 years old, she sat at that piano and played. She was good, not just good. She was the kind of good that makes people stop talking in the middle of a sentence and just listen. Her teachers noticed it early. One of them fought hard to get her a partial scholarship to the Vienna Conservatory, which was a serious, respected music school. Anna got in. She studied there for years. She worked harder than almost anyone, but when she finished, she found out something difficult. The world of professional music in Vienna had walls around it. Women could teach. Women could perform at small gatherings, private events, background entertainment for people eating dinner and talking over her. But concert halls? Real performances? The serious stages? Those were for men, or for women with noble surnames and wealthy fathers. Anna had neither, so she taught piano to children from middle-class families. She went to their homes, sat beside them on their piano benches, corrected their fingers, encouraged them when they got frustrated, charged a modest fee, and went home. It was a decent life, but anyone who knew her, really knew her, could see something in her eyes that never quite settled, like a bird that spends its whole life in a cage that's comfortable enough, but still a cage. She picked it up and looked at the seal, the crest of the Hartenberg family. She had heard that name before. Everyone in Vienna had. Duke Friedrich von Hartenberg was one of the most powerful men in the city. He owned large estates across Lower Austria and Bohemia. He had served in the military, managed vast properties, and moved in the highest circles of Austro-Hungarian society. He was also known for being cold, not rude exactly. Men of his position rarely needed to be rude. He was simply the kind of person who made you feel, without saying a single harsh word, that your presence in the room was tolerated rather than welcomed. His wife, Elise, had died 6 years before this letter arrived. After her death, something in the Duke had closed down. People who knew him said he became harder to reach, more formal, more distant. The piano in his salon, which Elise had played often, had been locked shut. He never touched it. He never allowed anyone else to touch it. But now, apparently, he was hosting a salon gathering, and someone had arranged for Anna to perform. The letter was not warm. It told her to arrive through the servants' entrance at 7 o'clock. She was to play one piece, a waltz by Johann Strauss, morning papers, and leave before supper. The payment offered was small. She would be, essentially, background music. Her neighbor, an older woman called Frau Meister who always had an opinion ready, told Anna to decline. "Men like that don't actually hear you," she said. "They hear the piano. You're just the hands." Anna folded the letter, put it in her coat pocket, and went to sit at her own piano. She practiced morning papers until she could play it perfectly. And then, when it was perfect, she set it aside and began working on something else. She had written a piece of her own the previous year. It had come to her during the weeks after her mother died, in those quiet, dark hours after midnight, when grief sits beside you like a heavy guest who refuses to leave. She had never named it properly. In her private notebook, she just called it the night piece. It was not cheerful. It was not light, but it was completely honest, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever written. She wasn't sure why she kept coming back to it that week. She just knew she needed to have it ready. The evening of October 14th was cold. Anna walked through the servants' entrance of the Hartenberg townhouse and was led down a long corridor by a footman who didn't look at her once. The walls were lined with portraits of the Duke's ancestors. Men in military uniforms, women in formal gowns, all of them staring down with the same expression of mild disapproval. The salon was already full when she arrived. 40 guests, maybe more. Silk dresses, decorated uniforms, jewelry catching the candlelight. The kind of room where everyone knew their place, and everyone stayed in it. Anna was shown to the piano, the one that had been locked for 6 years, now unlocked for this occasion. She set her sheet music on the stand. Morning papers, just as requested. Nobody greeted her. Nobody introduced her. A few people glanced over and then went back to their conversations. She was, exactly as her neighbor had predicted, the hands. The Duke arrived last. He was a tall man, gray at the temples, with the posture of someone who had spent decades being watched, and had decided to make that as unrewarding as possible for the watcher. He did not glance toward the piano. He sat down at the far end of the room and began speaking with a general about estate taxes. Herr Brennecke, the Duke's social secretary, a small nervous man who had arranged Anna's presence without fully telling the Duke about it, caught her eye from across the room and gave a quick nod. Begin. Anna placed her hands on the keys. She played the first 4 bars of Morning Papers, and then she stopped. The room didn't notice immediately. There's always a few seconds of delay when something unexpected happens in a social setting. People are mid-sentence. They're sipping wine, they're laughing at something. But Anna had noticed something in those 4 bars. She had glanced toward the Duke, not looking for approval, just reading the room the way she always did, and she had seen something that made her pause. He had stopped talking. He was looking at the piano. Not at her, at the piano itself. Like a man who has just seen something he thought was gone forever, suddenly standing in front of him. His face was still composed, his posture was still perfect, but his eyes were doing something different from the rest of him, something he probably didn't know they were doing. In that moment, Anna made a decision. She lifted her hands off the keys, shifted the sheet music aside, and began to play her own piece. The night piece. The one with no proper name. The room went quiet within about 8 bars. Not the polite kind of quiet where people pretend to listen while actually planning what they'll say next. The other kind. The kind where the music finds something in you that you weren't expecting, and you forget, just for a moment, that you were in the middle of a conversation. Anna played the whole thing. It lasted 11 minutes. She played it the way she had written it, honestly, without decoration, without trying to impress anyone. There were parts of it that were almost unbearably sad. There were parts that felt like a question being asked in the dark, with no certainty of an answer. And there were parts near the end that felt like the moment just before sunrise, when the sky isn't light yet, but the darkness has started to change. When she finished, nobody clapped immediately. That almost never happens. People always clap. It's the social reflex, the safe thing. But in that room, on that night, almost 30 seconds passed before anyone moved. 30 seconds of silence in a room of 40 people is a very long time. It felt like everyone was coming back from somewhere. Then someone at the back started clapping, and the rest followed. Anna sat very still for a moment. Then she looked toward the far end of the room. Duke Friedrich had not moved. He was still sitting exactly where he had been. But his wine glass was on the table beside him, untouched since she had started playing, and he was looking at her, directly at her. Not at the piano this time. Nu. Herr Brennecke intercepted her in the corridor before she could reach the exit. His face was tight. "You were given a specific piece to play," he said, keeping his voice low. "I arranged this based on certain expectations." "Yes," said Anna. "And you arranged for me to come through the servants' entrance. I followed your instructions as carefully as you followed mine." She turned and continued toward the door. She heard the footsteps behind her before she heard the voice. She turned, and the Duke was standing in the corridor. He had followed her. That was not something a man of his position typically did. "That was not the piece I was told you would play," he said. "No," Anna said. "It was the piece I decided to play." He looked at her for a moment. "My wife played that piano," he said. "I had it tuned this week for the first time in 6 years. I didn't fully understand why I agreed to do that. I think I understand now." He asked her name. Her full name, not the brief version on Herr Brennecke's arrangement sheet. He asked where she taught. Then he nodded once. The kind of nod that powerful men use when they want to say thank you but haven't practiced the words, and walked back into the salon. Anna stepped out into the cold Vienna night. She stood on the cobblestones for a moment. The air smelled of coal smoke and autumn leaves. She exhaled slowly. She didn't know what had just happened. She only knew something had. Wansud. The first letter from the Duke arrived 3 days later. Formal, almost businesslike. He wanted to arrange a small private performance. 6 guests, close family only. The payment he offered was generous. He did not specify a piece. Anna accepted. Over the next 2 months, she performed at the Hartenberg house 4 times. Each gathering was smaller than the last. By the 3rd visit, there were only a few people in the room. By the 4th, it was just the Duke. He had begun asking her questions between pieces. What did she hear in this particular passage? Why had she chosen that tempo? When she wrote her own compositions, where did they come from? His questions started out careful and academic. Over time, they became more personal, more searching. Like a man who has spent years building a very thick wall and has finally found a corner where it's slightly thinner. Anna answered honestly. She had no gift for flattery and no interest in performing anything off the piano. When he asked a question that seemed to be looking for a comfortable answer, she gave him the true one instead. He didn't always like it. He always came back. His sister-in-law, Countess Berta, a sharp and thoughtful woman who observed all of this with great interest, wrote to her sister, "Friedrich is changing, not gradually, the way people usually do. He is cracking, the way ice cracks in spring. That woman does not play music for him. She plays truth. And he cannot stop listening." 1. It did not go unnoticed. Vienna in 1882 was a city where everyone watched everyone else, and gossip moved faster than news. A duke meeting privately and repeatedly with a piano teacher of no social rank. It was the kind of thing people talked about over dinner. 2 of the duke's closest associates visited him separately to express concern. His estate advisor was careful and diplomatic about it. The general was direct. "She is not of your world, Friedrich. Whatever you are imagining, let it go." The Duke heard them both out. He said nothing in response. Anna's world reacted too. One family quietly withdrew their child from her lessons, citing scheduling. Frau Meister, who had moved from disapproval to worry, said to her one evening, "These men don't take women like us seriously, Anna. Not in the way you need to be taken seriously. Be careful." Anna went on teaching, went on practicing. When the Duke's next letter arrived, she waited 4 days before replying. Then she wrote back with a question of her own. She asked him plainly what he was hoping for from their arrangement. He didn't send a letter in response. He sent his carriage. They met in his private study, not the salon. He did not sit behind his desk. He indicated 2 chairs by the window, equal and across from each other, and they sat down like 2 ordinary people rather than a duke and a piano teacher. He told her about Elise, not the facts she could have learned from anyone in the city, not when she died or how, but the harder things. That after Elise was gone, he had decided the only way to keep functioning was to stop feeling so much. That grief, in his experience, made a man weak and useless. That he had locked the piano, because every time he saw it, it reminded him of what it felt like to be soft inside, and he had decided he couldn't afford that. He told her that when she had stopped mid-bar and switched to her own piece, something had opened in him before he could close it back up. He said it had been, and here he paused for a long moment, inconvenient. Anna listened to all of it without interruption. Then she said, "I don't play for people who want to be entertained. I play for people who need to be reached. That night, I reached you. The only question is what you do with that." It wasn't romantic in the way stories are supposed to be. It was 2 people, both of them shaped by loss, both of them used to hiding behind composure, sitting across from each other and deciding, carefully, slowly, to stop pretending quite so much. What followed was not a fairy tale ending. The Duke did not sweep Anna into a life of ease and luxury. She did not become a countess. Society did not throw open its arms and welcome them. What happened was quieter and more real than that. With the Duke's support, given without conditions, because Anna had made clear she would accept it no other way, she was able to rent a proper teaching studio and take on more students. More importantly, He used his influence to open one door that had always been locked to her. He arranged for her to perform at the Vienna Chamber Music Society, the kind of stage that had simply never been available to a woman of her background. She performed there in March of 1883. She played her night piece publicly for the first time, and for the first time gave it a proper name: The Weight of What Remains. The critics were divided, as critics always are. But one of them, Eduard Hanslick, the most respected music writer in Vienna, wrote that she had a quality that could not be taught or manufactured: the ability to make an audience feel not performed at, but accompanied. The Duke sat in the third row. He said very little afterward. He didn't need to. Their relationship stayed difficult to define by the rules of the time. They were seen together at certain events. He made no public declarations. She asked for none. They were two people who had found, in each other, the particular relief of not having to pretend, which in the end is one of the rarest things one human being can find in another. He asked if she would play the waltz, the original one, Morning Papers, by Strauss. The one she had been asked to play and hadn't. She looked at him. Why now? Because, he said, I think I can hear it properly now. 2 years ago, that waltz would have just been a waltz. I think now it would actually be one. I'd like to find out what that feels like. She sat down at the piano and played it, all of it, lightly, easily, the way it was written, cheerful and uncomplicated, and completely untroubled. It filled the room with the sound of something that didn't need to be anything other than what it was. When it ended, he said, That's lovely. Yes, said Anna. It is. You, now. Anna Lehr performed publicly in Vienna 13 more times after that first concert. Her compositions were never published while she was alive, but 3 of them, including The Weight of What Remains, were carefully written down by her niece, and still survive today in the Vienna Philharmonic archives. Duke Friedrich von Hartenberg died in 1899. When his estate was sorted through, his papers were mostly what you would expect from a man of his position: legal documents, correspondence about land and finance, formal letters. Almost nothing personal, almost nothing. Tucked into his private files, they found a concert program, just one, from the Vienna Chamber Music Society, March 1883. It had been folded and unfolded so many times over the years that the paper had worn thin along the creases. It was the only thing in those files that looked like it had been held often. Anna outlived him by 21 years. She kept teaching piano until she was 73 years old. In a short memoir written by her niece and published in 1931, the evening of October 14, 1882, was described as the night Anna decided to be brave. Anna herself, when asked in her later years what had made her set aside the assigned waltz and play her own piece for a room full of strangers and a man known for his coldness, gave an answer that her niece wrote down word for word. The room was full of people performing themselves. I didn't think another performance would help anyone. So I played the truest thing I knew. That is all I did. She didn't think of it as brave. She didn't think of it as a rebellion, or a statement, or a revolution. She just played honestly, in a room that wasn't expecting honesty, for a man who hadn't allowed himself to feel anything in 6 years. And that was enough to change everything. End of story.